Okay, we have this one here, a Boss 429 that will be built for street use. And this is my mentor, Chuck Stevens, 16 plug billet Boss 429 head. And this is basically for alcohol or top fuel type applications. Before we start, let's look at some of my cars having traction issues at the racetrack. Please subscribe, like, and share. Okay, today we will be talking about the 429 that I'm building here. It's going to be between 557 to 598 cubic inches, depends on the block we're going to end up using. If we use the factory block, which probably would make about 850 horsepower, with the studs, and perhaps if they make a girdle for it, and cement the bottom end of the block, we could get some stiff configuration built in it, so it could take the extra power, but the block is capable, especially when you stud the mains and everything. So this is what we're going to be doing as a project for a 68 Mustang. And also I'll touch bases on the advantages of the Boss 429 configuration as opposed to the almighty 426 Hemi, which is a true Hemi, and this is a semi-Hemi, and the advantages and disadvantages of both design when they played off against each other, and how they pair off with the regular inline 440 big block or FE series Ford inline cylinder head configuration. And then we look at the big block Chevy canted valve, and we will go through that rather briefly, and I'll do a more detailed video explaining the differences between this engine configuration or cylinder head configuration. So anyway, sit back guys, and let's enjoy this video. Thank you very much. Okay, we have this one here, a Boss 429 that will be built for street use, and basically it has to be a big cubic inch to use this massive cylinder head. And look at all the rocker arms. They're 1:7 ratio, just like the factory. And look at this long 6-inch rocker arm and the beefy rocker pedestals. You have no issue with the intake, but with this, it's another story. You might have flexing exhaust rocker arms, especially if you're running turbo, supercharger, or some kind of nitromethane alcohol, where the cylinder pressures are super high, especially with a blower or boost, that you will have a lot of resistance to open the exhaust valve, which is pretty large by itself, and you're going to have bending issues, and you'll have lofting of the valve after it opens up. Okay, so I just put a spacer here. I kind of figured this basically manifold is a street version. It's kind of low to clear most hoods. It's up to you to put a 1-inch spacer or 2-inch spacer, so it'll be probably be more effective, especially if you're running 598 or 557. This one here, I got dummied up on a stock block. Perhaps if we use a stock block, 557, or if we go aftermarket, as big as a 598 plus. And right now I have a good friend who is going to pass me some super Combustion blocks for bolt main. Hopefully that goes through. And also a magnesium 494, very rare 494 block that is being passed on to me by an old friend who used to work for Ford. And Bob Glidden, all those guys. He's got a deep connection to Ford Motorsport. And out of the goodwill of his heart, he's passing me his 494 Can-Am block, brand new in the box. That's amazing. But here we are. And I'm going to talk about why a Boss 429, okay, as opposed to a Chrysler or Hemi. But we're going to go through the basics of airflow, and then we'll go from there. So I'd rather do a technical thing besides explaining why and those things we need to be concerned. So here we are. I slipped there. And this is going to be quite a project, and I'm looking forward to doing this. It's going on a 68 or 67 FASTBACK Pro Street Mustang. Somebody from Los Angeles. You're looking at a 16 plug Boss 429 billet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 spark plug hole on just this one side. Take note of the intake rocker arm. Unlike the new KAASE I'm working with, this one has got a straight shaft, but it seemed to have a lot longer exhaust rocker arm compared to the Boss 429 KAASE. Here you can see the rocker arm. They are indeed short. They're stiffer. Also on a shaft, and that's a blower manifold for basically alcohol or maybe nitromethane. And look at this. It's got a distributor drive right there. Here you go. You have one there, and then you have another one there. So it's got a dual head distributor, and you can see the blower manifold and the sheet metal valve cover, and you got a holder there so you can easily pull the heads on when you're doing fuel racing. You can change the head gasket, take apart the piston, but that was the purpose of this thing. There you go. You can see the valve covers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Very impressive. And right there you can see the distributor as much as this was here. So you can time the leading or the trailing magneto or distributor, whatever you might prefer to run. Here's another picture. This is rare. This is my mentor's, like I said, my mentor Chuck Stevens' engine. He passed on, and this ended up with his son or wherever it is right now. I would love to run it and see what I'll do. Another picture now with the blower. You can see, you'll see this is going to be an interesting piece for you 385 series fans. There it is. Okay, we took this picture years ago when it passed on, and up there in basically the Ventura County in California by Samas, a small town called Samas. That's where we had our headquarters, where we do a lot of our brainstorming in the shop. There's another picture. There's a close-up. Okay, now you can see how with the shaft and the shaft on top too, unlike the KAASE, which is configured a different way. But check this out. There's another angle. Alright, so what do you guys think? The conventional way or the KAASE way, which is a beefier version, as cast from the factory? This completely changes the rocker design compared to the Boss 429 from the factory. Here's the John KAASE Boss 9 intake manifold. It's good. They cleaned up the divider line there a little bit, right around the plenum area here. They cleaned it up. Just need a little bit of work on the bottom of the plenum. All right. So by the time we redo the flange, if we try to match it up to the head as cast, and some work right here, and blending the open or 4-hole spacer, whichever one we might end up using, would be advisable. All right, so there it is. They did some minor blending, and that's about it. It's up to you to finish it up. The gasket lines up on the manifold. Look how much bigger it is right here. You can see there's a lot of extra meat on the bottom of the port, perhaps. If you're going to use this for the street, they did that to basically boost the low or mid-range torque. Let me just line this up a little bit better. It's not line, but you see it. Okay, there we go. They probably did that to boost the mid-range of the manifold itself, right? Because I think if you open this up big time all the way, then you got a free flow. I have to flow the heads the way they are, and I have to flow this manifold the way they are. So this might be a way to make this a straight manifold. And then if you really want to go max out on it, then you just got to open it up to the whole size of that gasket to match the cylinder intake ports, as you can see moments before when I posted that. Okay, let us look at the difference between the 426 Hemi and the 429 semi-Hemi. Not really a Hemi, all right? So it doesn't have a direct path between the intake and exhaust. It has more of a angled, because it's also canted, but it's not really as a direct 12-to-6 configuration. It goes off to the side, and I'll explain the difference there. Now, historically speaking, those two engines dominated NASCAR super speedway racing, in spite of the fact that they were restricted with one carburetor, as opposed to the inline FE Fords, the big block Chevy, even though it's canted valve, still did not compare. Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buicks, all those configurations back then. The Hemi 429 and the Hemi Chrysler, one carburetor. And those two guys, those two engines are duking it out with the Superbirds and the Talladega Torinos, or was that Mercury Marauder or whatever like that, the Cale Yarborough type cars. So the Petty Enterprises and the Wood Brothers, they're duking it out. Okay, so the big super speedways, guess what? They dominate to each other, and it came down to aero, how good their cars are, because they're making more power than the rest of the engine produced by GM and Ford. Now, this being said, the configuration of the 426 lend itself to, basically top fuel alcohol racing. The semi-Hemi has a little bit of a swirl, tumble situation on its combustion chamber, and lends itself more for basically NA applications. So you figure these two engines are closely related because they're so-called Hemi, but it's only one is a true Hemi, which is the 426. Therefore, with that being said, I'll explain here the difference between these two engine designs and their advantages and disadvantages. And basically today, recent Pro Stock configuration, I tell you, they follow the 429 design element. And then when you look at top fuel alcohol, since the 50s with the 392 until today, they still mimic the true Hemi configuration. Okay, the Boss 429 is this way: IHRA Pro Stock, IHRA mountain motors, NHRA Pro Stock, you know, all that configures a 429 design. Okay, so these two engines have great legacies that affects them or still has their place in today's racing engine. Almost all the GM, Chrysler, Ford Pro Stock engines, guess what? They're not really a true Hemi. They're the semi-Hemi, Boss 429 configuration, and I'll explain that. So it's a little bit more clear for everybody. What else did I forget? Oh, also, they were poor street performers. When you look at the 429 semi-Hemi, or let's just say shotgun Hemi, it has a 4,360 bore, big bore, but the stroke is only 3.59, a tad over a 351 Windsor in a small block Chevy. So now when they say they were really lacking in power on the street, yeah, they're getting beat by, I think the 428s were faster, and the 427 high riser or medium riser, they're faster than the shotgun engines. Same thing with the Chrysler 4250 and I think 375 stroke, a little bit better than the shotgun Hemis. Okay, because it has a little bit more stroke, and as far as stroke is concerned on the street, that's torque, down low. All right, but that said, early design of the 426 Hemi were getting beat by the 440s. And how many Mopar guys out here will say, yep, my 440 was actually faster than my 426 Hemi, or the wedge was actually quicker than the 426 Hemi. And I've seen that happen many times. In fact, when you look at the 383, that was one impressive engine. Okay, and my best buddy back then had a 383. I shit you not. They would RPM like there's no tomorrow, and that's a big block, 335 stroke, smaller than a small block Chevy or small block Ford. So we're looking at, you know, this configuration wasn't really justified in running in the street because, hey, come to think of it, they lack compression. And this two combination, and I will explain again why they did that function very good on the street. And I'll show you right here. It's got a lot to do with swirl and tumble characteristics, which the 426 didn't quite have compared to the 429. But the 426 had 3,750 stroke, which is more stroke than the 359 diminutive stroke on the doggone shotgun engine. So these two played in, and they were not really a great street engines production-wise. You know, whatever the 426 came in a Hemi on a Barracuda or a Cuda or a Roadrunner or a Charger, and same thing with the Mustang. It only came in that doggone Mustang. All right, they weren't really very impressive. Again, compression. That's why early variations of these in stock, super stock runs, well, basically super stock, the wedge engines had an advantage. And then they found out more compression with these engines because they lacked the mixture motion characteristics of their combustion chamber and of course their port. They relied heavily on compression, whereas the other wedge engines, Ford, GM, Chrysler, you know, they relied a lot on their mixture motion or their tumble swirl characteristics on their heads, and they're able to function better at street levels compression and stroke configuration. And I'll explain that. All right, guys. Well, let's start. Here we're looking at the Chrysler Hemi. Check that out. Okay, straight in, goes in, and some of the column charge blows out the exhaust because it's a straight through. Guess what? You lose your dynamic compression, and it has an open chamber, not much mixture motion. All you have is a predominant tumble issue. You have no swirl because it's a straight through path. So you're getting all is a tumble with no quench and then the tendency of the intake to come and blow through the exhaust, loses dynamic compression. That's why these things are kind of soft on the street. Without a lot of compression, you got issues. All right, so look at that, straight path in and out. It'll contaminate that column charge, unlike when we look at the Boss 429. But for top fuel, funny car, you don't need swirl, tumble, or any of those mixture motion or quench pads to further mix. You already got basically dynamite for fuel. It's gonna go and go real strong. Okay, now we're looking at the Boss 9, Boss 429 configuration. If you look at the intake valve, it's shifted to one side, more like 11:30, and this is more like 5 o'clock. Whereas the Chrysler Hemi is straight. And the issue with that is it intake comes in, tumbles primarily, and goes out the exhaust. The issue with that for an NA application is it has a very good tendency, since it's facing directly from each other, the exhaust reversion will come in and contaminate the intake column trying to get into the cylinder on the next intake stroke. That in itself is disastrous when you look at NA. And this is why you see the 426 Chrysler Hemis don't have much of a chance on the street for the same compression. The wedge 426, 440, they will run circles around them until we found out that we put a lot of compression in them, and there you go. Then it tends to gain an advantage. But at that particular time, they didn't have that much compression, and that was the issue. Here, it's not a direct path. It's offset. It has swirl. Same thing with there's a cant on the exhaust. Whatever reversion starts to happen, it's not a direct path to the intake. Okay, it has to twist, unlike if it's this straight. So reversion issues is minimized on this configuration. That's why it's dominating for an NA configuration. It has advantages, definite advantages over a true Hemi because of these. Remember, the intake goes this way. Okay, I'm exaggerating the point of path, but it's not straight. It's offset a little bit, and that will not shoot straight to and pull over your intake column straight, and you lose dynamic compression because some of your column charge goes out to the exhaust, which is prevalent on the Hemi configuration. Because everything's straight through, column charge comes in, will go through the exhaust valve into the exhaust port, losing your dynamic compression. At the same time, reversion comes in straight through and also contaminate the intake column. It's significantly lessened with this configuration right here. This is the true Hemi configuration, basically copied from the 426. This is a Yamaha head. Okay, there you go. Yamaha head on a Toyota block, 18RG 2TG. They used a Yamaha head. And Yamaha followed and copied the 426 configuration. Look at here. Straight inline. Okay? There is hardly any swirl capability here. The flow comes in and tumbles. Alright? On top of the piston. That's it. No, hardly any swirl. Not at all. Now, here's what I'm working on. I'm trying to put some quench pad on this head, and what I'm trying to do is see if it's going to hurt me flow wise on the corners here. Okay, and if it doesn't hurt the flow and I made the combustion chamber smaller, it will gain power due to the fact that the bigger combustion chamber here dissipates a lot of the heat energy within the confines of the combustion chamber, whereas here it's more concentrated towards the middle. And all the dormant air and fuel are pushed towards the center when the piston comes up, approximately 10 to 5 degrees before top dead center on the ignition cycle. and they kickstart the burn really when they collide and push it towards the center. So now you have this issue with tumble, and then it helps you out when it comes up on the ignition phase going up to TDC. Here it doesn't have any help from any quench area. That's why the 426 was rather weak on the street. What saved them was they had a 3750 stroke compared to the 429's 359. Okay, a little bit more stroke helps. It's called cubic inches, and it's a lever arm on the crank. So here we go. We'll see. Let me see if I can just open it up. Okay, and I'll see. Here's where I'm trying to figure it out, where I could make that combustion chamber smaller without restricting the flow right here. Okay, that's my main concern. I'm going to be working on the flow bench to see if I can get this thing going. And same thing with the exhaust. Alright, so that's my concern. Here it is, the intake port. You can see how much cant the exhaust valve has. And look at the intake. Basically, this is not allowing a straight shot. Okay, and it has a lot more mixture motion. That's why it's prevalent for NA application. Remember, once you have a top fuel configuration or alcohol on a true Hemi, it doesn't matter. You get basically a dynamite blowing up in the combustion chamber. With an NA, high octane fuel, racing fuel or whatever you're running, you need some kind of mixture motion as well as some kind of a quench pad to help aerate the still burning intake mixture. So you have to have some kind of mixture motion there to help mix it up. Completely unnecessary with a top fuel combination. You could get by without those mixture motion and it still have good combustion. In fact, combustion would come out more like a dynamite in there on a top fuel configuration. There you see, unlike the Boss 429, straight. Alright, that is a true Hemi. It is obvious. When you look at the Boss 429, it's more complicated, the valve train. Some of these guys here got shaft rocker arms. Take off the shaft rocker, pull the whole valve train out. Unlike on the Boss 429, there's a lot more monkey motion going on, and you're going to have issues when you only got so many minutes or hours, all right, to change the head gasket and change the piston or whatever you need to do in between rounds. In the closing parts of this video, let me just reiterate what I said earlier about us trying to build a Boss 429 for fuel racing. Top fuel, funny car. But the problem with my statement was I stated earlier clearly that the true Hemi Chrysler has an advantage for blown fuel racing, wherein the Boss 429 shotgun has an advantage in NA type racing. So why would we build a Boss 429 for fuel racing with the distinct disadvantage of a semi-Hemi configuration as opposed to a true Hemi layout? Here's what we did. Well, to go back on my statement about the Hemi having an advantage for nitromethane alcohol on boost configuration, and the 429 has an advantage in NA application. They're both known as Hemis, but one is really a true Hemi. This particular one here is a real true Hemi. Now, when we look at this thing, okay, look at the configuration. Look at the rocker arm. Right here is the exhaust spring. And right there's the intake spring or valve, exhaust valve, intake valve. Guess what? It's not this way anymore. Where the Boss 429, the intake is here and the exhaust is here. It's really canted as well as a semi-Hemi. This is a true Hemi. In order for us to really compete in this configuration, we cannot compete with a true Boss 429 head configuration for fuel racing. The only way we can do that is with a true Hemi hemispherical combustion chamber right here. That's why when Chuck made this project, he wanted a true Hemi configuration to compete in the fuel, nitromethane, alcohol, you name it. And we have a dual, we have a distributor there, of course, and then we have the other magneto here, or magneto there, magneto here. So there's a trailing and a leading spark distributor or magneto. So there you are, folks. This is where the configuration changes. Right there. Straight through. We're not about clueless to come up with a Boss 429 semi-Hemi and compete in a top fuel configuration funny car, because you're not going to make it. That's it. Something to think about, guys. This video is dedicated to my mentor, Chuck D.C. Stevens. I miss you, buddy. Been a lot to me, taught me a lot, and I sure miss you. Your son, Mike, out there in Georgia, and I, your daughter-in-law, your grandkid, we're missing you. Thank you a lot. Thanks for everything.